Good morning. To anyone who thought President Trump's second year might be a bit more relaxed than the first, two words: fire and fury. That title of the blistering new bestseller about the Trump White House also describes President Trump's response to the book, which has intensified an extraordinary debate captured this morning in headlines across the country and around the world. Does President Trump have the mental stability it takes to handle his office?
This guy that doesn't know me at all. By the way, did not interview me for he said he interviewed me for 3 hours in the White House. It didn't exist, okay? It's in his imagination.
President Trump at Camp David Saturday calling Fire and Fury a work of fiction.
My credibility is being questioned by a man who has less credibility than perhaps anyone who has ever walked on Earth at this point.
Author Michael Wolff's seismic claims have shaken the White House and broken Trump's relationship with his former top strategist.
Did Steve Bannon betray you, Mr. President? Any words about Steve Bannon?
I don't know. He called me a great man last night, so, you know, he obviously changed his tune pretty quick.
Bannon's quotes jump off the pages of Fire and Fury with unvarnished attacks on Trump and his children. Don Jr. is treasonous. Ivanka, dumb as a brick. Comments that earned Bannon a new nickname from Trump.
Sloppy Steve is now looking for a job.
The book reports that Trump and his campaign were shocked by a win they never expected. And in the White House portrayed by Wolff, President Trump is woefully unfit for the job. One staffer said working with Trump was like trying to figure out what a child wants. Others inside the White House thought he was no more than semi-literate, calling him an idiot and a dope.
According to your reporting, everyone around the president, senior advisors, family members, every single one of them questions his intelligence and fitness for office.
Let me put a marker in the sand here. 100% of the people around him.
The book has drawn a full-throated denial from the White House podium.
It's disgraceful and laughable. If he was unfit, he probably wouldn't be sitting there and wouldn't have defeated the most qualified group of candidates the Republican Party has ever seen.
And Saturday morning, Trump took matters into his own hands with an early morning tweet. My two greatest assets have been mental stability and being, like, really smart, calling himself a very stable genius. Then that press conference at Camp David.
Well, only because I went to the best colleges, or college, came out, made billions and billions of dollars, became one of the top business people, went to television, and for 10 years was a tremendous success, as you probably have heard. Ran for president one time and won.
Roundtable here to take this on, joined by our chief political analyst, Matthew Dowd, Democratic strategist Stephanie Cutter, who is a senior advisor to President Obama, the chair of the American Conservative Union, Matt Schlapp, Roland Martin from TV One, and Republican strategist Sara Fagen, political director for George W. Bush, now with CNBC. And Matt, let me begin with you. It seems like every White House in a generation has been hit like a book like this, usually by Bob Woodward, not this time around. But what's your big takeaway from here, and how much of this can we trust?
Well, speaking as a genius, I have three. I mean, there's so many, but I have three. First, I'm not a huge fan of Michael Wolff and the style of journalism that entails. I think that the problem with that style of journalism is it's evidenced by celebrity. It talks about all these tawdry stories and all that. I don't think it adds to our discourse, and I don't think it helps us move forward as a country. That being said, he does paint a broad picture, take all the little stories out of it, with insiders who have not denied they've said all of the things that they've been quoted as saying, of something that some Republicans on the record, and most Republicans off the record have said, that there's a question about the president's temperament, that he has serious questions about his mental acuity, can he handle the office, all of the stresses of the office. It's all confirmed, those things that have been talked about for a year. And the third thing is, I think fundamentally the president only made this matters worse in what he's done. All the tweets and everything have basically confirmed everything Michael Wolff said.
Well, that's
everything he's done has confirmed it.
To Sara Fagen, when you hear him put out that tweet, stable genius, it's kind of like Richard Nixon, I'm not a crook.
Yeah, I mean, he handled it in the worst possible way by adding to it. He should have just blown it off and, you know, discredited the author, who discredited himself by being sloppy, and let it go. But Donald Trump cannot do that. To me, the takeaway from this book, though, is there's a great lesson for anybody wanting to run for president, which is be careful who you surround yourself with. Donald Trump's, one of his biggest mistakes was surrounding himself with people who didn't have his interests in mind. Steve Bannon clearly looks out for Steve Bannon, And that's the worst possible chief strategist to put in the White House.
Well, and Matt Schlapp, let me take this to you. You had Steve Bannon come to the CPAC conference. I remember that back early in 2017 when he was riding quite high. Is he done now?
No, I don't think he's done. I think he's greatly marginalized his voice. I think most Trump supporters, most conservatives, most Republicans, quite frankly, want to take a big, long break from him and his brand of politics. I think the issues behind him still animate the Republican Party and the conservative movement, but I really want to agree with Sarah on this. You know, they staffed up the White House. You could see it in the most incomprehensible way with people that did not have the president's best interests at heart. Quite frankly, they also weren't experienced. They talked way too much. They didn't have a strategy behind it. And I think the person who realized it the quickest was the president,
well, except
who said, I don't think this is working. And I think you got to give General Kelly a lot of credit. They have changed a lot of the behavior that has been chronicled in the book.
I think there's no question the White House seems to have changed its operations under General Kelly. But let me take that point to Stephanie Cutter. On the one hand, yes, these are staffed by people who didn't necessarily have the president's best interests at heart. But one of the other things that you see in this book is that the president's daughter and the president's son-in-law had outsized influence.
Absolutely. And we knew that before the book came out, and we know what kind of problems that presents in a White House. We've, in some way, shape, or form, we've all been inside the White House.
Because we've all been influenced by those relatives.
And influenced by those relatives. But it is extremely disruptive to a well-functioning White House. I think the other takeaway, yes, that White House lacked a team ready to go that was loyal to the president, but they had a very hard time finding people who would go into the White House to work for this president. And I think that it created an unvirtuous circle.
I don't think that's true.
And this book makes it worse, though. It's going to make it harder.
And Roland, let me bring that to you, because I think the central insight in the book really is that they didn't think they were going to win. From the president on down, and all through the campaign and heading into the early days in the White House, they acted like it.
All true, and the bottom line is here. This book changes nothing. I read 250 to 350 pages last night. Bottom line is simple. Everything that he laid out, we already knew in terms of the kind of people who he chose, the fact that you don't have principles, you don't have morals, you don't have ethics. And what you have here, though, is a Republican Party where you have different pieces. They get exactly what they want from Donald Trump. You have white conservative evangelicals. They don't care about how he has treated women, because all they want are federal judges who will get rid of same-sex marriage and abortion. You have folks on the business side, you get the tax reform. You have the folks who are all about the social issues. They get what everybody gets exactly what they want. This comes down to power. The Republican Party, they want all those folks, they want power. Donald Trump provides that. And so as long as he's there and they can get what they want, it doesn't matter. This book will not change a thing. And I'll give the last point is this here. You look at the fact that Democrats forced out Senator Al Franken and Congressman John Conyers. Have Republicans forced out Texas Congressman Blake Farenthold? No. This is about power.
It raises the question of power, but Sarah, it does also raise these questions of the president's fitness. I mean, a lot of the anecdotes in there, let's say that 50% of them are true.
I think that's probably the right number.
It raises serious questions about his mental capacity, his ability to process information, his impulse control.
It does, but it doesn't really matter, and it's not going to matter until and unless something very catastrophic happens as the result of a tweet or a provocation to another international leader. And until that happens, I don't think most of America is paying much attention to this conversation.
Just respond to this question about his fitness for office, because maybe more than anyone on this panel, I deal with him and dealt with him for years before he was president, while he's been president. I actually enjoy it, Roland. And
we'll pray for you.
As personal as you want to make this and say, oh, he's cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs and all the rest, it's like, I think actually you just embolden him. And my interactions with him, he doesn't repeat these stories. He totally gets the policy. Unlike a lot of politicians, what people don't get sometimes about Donald Trump is he asks you 20 times more questions than most politicians. Most politicians just talk at you and they yammer on and they give you their point of view. Donald Trump is exactly the opposite. He wants to bring you in. He wants to get the information you have. And I find that this coverage, he did a whole chapter in this book, Michael Wolff, on CPAC. Never called anyone, and CPAC didn't call me. His facts are wrong from top to bottom. He said Wilbur Ross was the Secretary of Labor. He said that John Kelly was the Director of Homeland Security. Another man has that job. He was the Secretary of Homeland Security. When it came to CPAC, he got fact after fact after fact wrong, and he didn't even bother to call. Look, there might be some truth in here, but it's riddled and surrounded by the fact that this is a journalist who doesn't believe in calling anyone to correct sources.
Okay, so the Donald Trump and the Trump supporters like Matt, well, I give him credit for, even though if I gave Matt truth serum, I know what Matt would say about Donald Trump.
I'll tell you right now.
Yeah, a level of integrity that he holds this office to. The idea that Donald Trump and them would somehow castigate this author for not being truthful and having a credibility problem is a bit like Al Capone saying a jaywalker is a criminal. I mean, their level of credibility...
So they're made for each other.
Well, they're not only made for each other, one's a king of it, and the other one's a pauper in this. I would say that this book is not about palace intrigue fundamentally, though all the stories, as I say, I don't agree with this type of journalism. I don't like this. But fundamentally, the core kernel of this story is questioning Donald Trump's fitness to hold the office, which has not only been done by people on the left and people that don't like him and people in the media, but it's done almost universally off the record by nearly every Republican official when you talk to them off the record, and some on the record.
But George, when you get what you want, it doesn't matter, and that's part of this fundamental issue here. When you look at all the different people within the party, as long as they get what they want, Donald Trump serves a very unique purpose. And the fact that he has no ideology, he has no convictions, he has no morals, he has no principles. I mean, the fact of the matter is that's good.
I think the other part of the story here, and we can debate Michael Wolff's book, there are lots of factual inaccuracies, which is part of the problem here. But as Matt said, that it paints a picture that we've seen for a long time and has been painted by mainstream media and Republicans. So it's not hard to believe. The reason we're talking about it so much is because it's not hard to believe. But the bigger issue here is if we do have a president who has some fitness issues, even though he says he's like really smart, there are some problems that are happening. And Roland, I understand what you're saying, but the bigger issue is, can we have a functioning government with somebody like that in the White House? And up until now, you could argue that yes, but you're starting to see some craters in that.
And we're going to talk about the impact on the 2018 agenda. I want you all to stand by. You're going to come back later in the show to get into that.